Hi, friends. Welcome to the Jill Monaco Show. I'm your host, Jill, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a speaker, author, and life coach. Some weeks I share what God is teaching me, and other times I invite a friend to join me on the podcast, and we chat about what it means to love God, love ourselves, and love others. Here we go. Welcome back to the Jill Monaco Show. Amy Joob and I have been walking in the same circles for years. But if you've been following this podcast for a while, the circle may surprise you. We both have been in the entertainment industry and worked in some trade shows together. It was an extra side biz for me as an actor and for Amy as a model. We ran into each other again a few years ago. I was really stuck. She helped me come up with the concept for the cover of my book, Freedom Coach Model. And then a year later, I gave her some tips on launching her book. It is so fun to see how God just works and knits us all together, right? Well, Amy is a motivational speaker, model, and now published author. She's traveled around the United States and Canada as a team captain for Porsche North America and as a fitness model and product specialist for MetaRex. She shares her story in her new book, Model Behavior: Make Your Career Path Your Calling. Amy lives near me in the Chicago suburbs with her husband, Eric, and her children, Arianna and Ashton. Amy and I talk today about how to be bold in your faith in an area that may be uncomfortable, how to be a good steward of the talents God's given you and live out your faith. I know you'll be so encouraged by her sweet spirit and her deep well of love that she has for God to be glorified through her. Now, before we get started, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. I get emails from listeners all over the world who are encouraged in their faith because of our guests, and I love hearing from you. It's so much fun. If you haven't already, I'd love it if you'd consider leaving a review and rating on the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to the show. It helps our podcast get easily discovered by listeners who are searching for topics we discuss here on the Jill Monaco Show. Thank you so much for your support. I have literally the best listeners. I appreciate the stars and a few words of how the podcast has encouraged you. All right, let's get into the conversation with my friend Amy. Hey, Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being on today.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's been such a fun ride with both of us growing, as writers and authors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can't believe it. It's amazing. This past year, I've seen dreams come true that I've prayed for such a long time, and I'm so grateful. And as I'm sure you are too, just having your book out, it's such an accomplishment.
It is. And some people aren't really familiar with my past as an actor, but you totally get me. We've walked in these circles for a while, and I want the listeners to get to know you about, some of the work that you've done. So tell us about your modeling. I know some people are going to be like, how did you get into that? And why did you get into that?
Sure. Well, I live here in Chicago and I met my husband here and we were already married and I had been a triathlete. So I ran, I bike, I swam in a race and I was managing a teen center and that was kind of my passion. And I thought that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to maybe even go pro. And I got into two accidents, a car accident and a bike accident. And that basically ended my triathlon career. So I was really devastated and I was in my late 20s. Yeah, and I was like, now what? It really defined me. Even though I was a Christian, I felt like this is what I wanted to do. And now I had this huge question mark. And I've always been goal oriented. So it's like I needed a new goal, a new dream. And just through a lot of prayer, talking to my husband, and actually, strangely enough, a lot of people over the years had said, I think you should model. So as I was praying, that was coming back to my memory. And strange people were actually like on the street saying, hey, I think you should model. And so what I did is I first talked to my husband because I thought, I value his opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? I asked Eric. And yeah, he said, Amy, you know what? I always wanted to marry a model. So I was like, okay, I have my husband's approval, right?
I was
And so
thinking he would be like, honey, you're beautiful to me no matter what. Like something super spiritual. And in the meantime, he's like, well, duh,
yeah.
I know I married a model.
There you go. Oh, it's so sweet. Yeah. So he gave me the thumbs up, and I really wanted to, pray and know it was like God's will, because I had been really wild in my past life before I came to know Jesus. And I just thought, man, this is a crazy industry, is what my thought was.
Mm,
And I didn't want to be sucked back into some crazy lifestyle. So what we did is we decided to pray and kind of lay like a fleece, like Gideon did. And we said, if one more person, was it Gideon? I think it was. If one more person says to me, you should model like a stranger, that's
mhm.
going to be my sign from God that I should pursue the industry.
Yeah.
So probably within 2 weeks of that prayer, there was someone at a focus group I was at. She said, I really think you should be modeling. And so,
Huh.
yeah, you can read about it in my book, but that was kind of my green light from God. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And, when we're in that industry, there's so many things that, people see the end result, they see the success we've had,
Yeah.
but they don't realize like all the challenges. I mean, they hear about them, right? Like
Sure.
it's the
Sure.
starving artist kind of thing.
Yes.
But when you're a Christian in that field, it's even harder. I mean, I was in that industry when I wasn't saved and then after I got saved as well.
Sure.
And, conversations are different and you want to represent the Lord well. So, how did that play
Sure.
out for you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely something at the forefront of my mind. I actually went to 2 different colleges and I had a degree in pastoral studies. So
Mm,
that was always in my mind too, like, you know what? I've gone to school, basically to be a pastor, be a minister. So how would, the people that taught me, the pastors, the people at my college see if I were to do a certain job? So early on, I kind of had to go into like, I know God is calling me. I know He wants me to bring His love. He wants me to bring Jesus to this dark world. And I've always been evangelistic. And I thought, these are people that may never step into a church. I'm going to bring the church, I'm going to bring Jesus to them. But then I had to think of, what are my standards going to be? Am I just going to say
yeah.
yes to every job, or am I going to kind of put some parameters on it? So it's kind of funny. My father-in-law was one of my mentors. He's actually a pastor. He's a retired pastor now.
Oh,
And yeah, he said to me, Amy, one time he's like, keep God, keep Eric, and keep your clothes on. He's like, everything else, I think you're okay. But I kind of
oh,
was like, okay, Dad, thanks for that. And I did really trust
yeah.
his judgment. He's a good guy. But I said,
Yeah.
okay, God, what do I feel comfortable doing? And so I kind of just decided early on, like, I'm not going to do lingerie.
Hmm.
I'm not going to do alcohol ads because alcoholism runs in my family and I've had a problem with it and I've decided to quit drinking. So I didn't want to promote that.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to do like tobacco. So I had certain things that I said, if this comes to me, I'm just going to say no. And it was tested at times, I'll have to tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, one time I can think of, actually, there's two big things. One was I got asked to be like a Miller Lite girl. They're like, Amy, you're chosen. My agent called me and she's like, they're going to do a blow up of you. You're going to wear this little Bears, jersey and short shorts. It's going to be really cute. And they're going to put you for Miller Lite, in all these grocery stores everywhere around Chicagoland. And I just thought, oh my gosh, it's such an honor to be chosen like that. I'm sure it would have paid well, but what would people think? you know,
Yeah.
Me being a Christian, and at the time I was leading like a women's kind of breakfast Bible study for the women at the college, and what would those ladies think? What would the people that taught me think if they saw that? And I just decided, no, I can't do this. And I know my agent thought I was crazy, and every time I said no to something big, I thought, have I committed career suicide? But in the
Right.
end, they respected me, and I still got calls from them.
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
just to clarify, like, we know that there's nothing wrong with alcohol. It's just that
yeah, it was my
you, y-
conviction.
yeah, your
Yeah,
conviction based on your past and what you had made a
yes.
decision. And I think that's so
Sure.
important as we're
Yes.
going into any industry, like to know
Yeah.
here's the worst part of it, and here's the temptations, or here's who I want to
Sure.
be. Here's how I want to show up in
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yeah, and you have to kinda know for yourself, because, like you said, I
Yeah.
mean, everyone's convictions are a little different, and so I wouldn't wanna put that on anyone else, and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
you can't do this because I didn't." Because there might be
Right.
things that I feel okay doing that other people don't, that, God might give me the peace about doing, and in fact, just being in the industry, some people might be like,
Yeah.
"That's totally a no-no for me, but you have to be led by his spirit.
Right.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. Um, uh, I was thinking of a job that I did before I was saved, and
Yeah.
now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Oh my gosh. And
Okay.
but it's a long story. It's probably not okay to tell on the
Yeah.
podcast, but I remember when I
Okay.
got the job, my mom was like, it was a tour. It won the Tony for best musical on Broadway, and then I did the national
Oh,
tour. And
yeah.
everyone was like, "Oh, I'm so excited." My mom's like, "I'm going to invite everyone from the church." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Cannot invite the people from the church."
Yeah.
Like, not. And then I
Sure.
had to tell her about my costumes and stuff, and or the lack of costume,
Yeah.
and she was like, "Oh, oh, okay." Like I could, my mom's voice like skipped a beat, you know?
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
man. But
Sure.
even then, I think back
Mhm.
to the people that were influencing me in the industry
Yeah.
for
Sure, sure.
Jesus. So one of
Yes.
the people that was also a lead in the tour, he loved God. And I was
Yes.
fascinated by how he handled his convictions, in that show. So
Yeah.
how did you
That's
share your
awesome.
faith with other
That is
models?
so good. I just think that's so important what you just said, even about him being there, because I think that we all, as Christians, need to go where he's calling us, right? Even though
Yeah.
it may seem unconventional. Yeah. So just saying yes to him, even when it's scary and going to those places. So the way
Hmm.
I did it, I prayed a lot. I prayed a lot before every job. I prayed over, the client, whether it was a print job or a runway show or a trade show or, auto show. And I would just pray for opportunities. I pray for divine appointments. I remember I used to pray the prayer of Jabez all the time and just look for opportunities. Yeah, I didn't want to shove the gospel, necessarily down someone's throat. Although I think the first tour I did, I traveled with Sally's Beauty Supply and I was doing theatrical runway with a group of dancers and we went around the nation. And I really made it a point to go to every girl and share with her my faith.
Mm.
And it was good and bad. I think, whether they were ready or not, I was like, "I'm here to share." And one
Yeah.
one person didn't take it so well. She was like, "Amy, I know you're trying to do all this good and stuff, but I don't wanna hear your God stories." And I
Mm.
just kinda had to say to her, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to offend you," and my hope was just to share with you, what God has done in my life and that he loves you too, and I'm sorry, I won't talk anymore about it. And so from then I thought, I got to be a little more wise, like look for the open door. And
Mm.
so there was times, like more intimate times, whether I was on a show floor with someone and it was slow or backstage or, we'd go to dinner, after a job and then people would ask me. And a lot of times the question would be like, oh, you're married. How did you meet your husband? And then I would
Yeah.
say, I actually met my husband at church. And that kind of opened the door because, like, oh,
Yeah.
like, you go to church, but then I wanted to share more. It's more than just church, it's about having
Yeah.
a relationship with Jesus, and but that would kinda give me an opportunity to share more about my faith and be more open.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
good. And I know it's not like a black and white answer. We can't say
Yeah.
to people who want to be in modeling or who are in the entertainment industry, here's the way to do it to be successful. It really
Yeah.
is being led by God. And I
Yes.
think the more if we are filled with God's spirit and we love him, we'll show up and they're going to notice that it's like what the Bible says about Caleb. There was a
Yes.
different spirit about him.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and we
It's so
carry
true.
him into where we're at. And I think people notice. I remember I was playing tennis in a tennis club, and this girl that was, a part of the club, she just said, "There's something different about you. Like there's a sparkle in your eye. Like, what is that?" And I knew
Yeah.
right away. And then I was like, okay, that's God. How do I share?
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
But taking the opportunities God gives us and just being ourselves, it'll just naturally happens, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's totally true.
And there's
Yeah. Seems like
lots
you
of,
don't have to.
oh, I'm
Mhm.
sorry. And
Go
there's
ahead.
lots of times that I don't share and
Mhm.
I'm listening to God, like, is this the right time to share or not? Because
Yeah.
I might be planting a seed or I might be leading them to the Lord, but God knows where they're at. And I think when we have an agenda to get somebody saved, that like sometimes is not as good as I want to love them like Jesus would love them.
Yes. Yes.
And if we do
I
that,
agree.
we'll meet them where they're at. And then Jesus does all the work. I just have to
Yes.
be
Yes.
him be his hands and feet.
Yeah, I
Like,
totally agree with that. And especially when you see certain people over and over, as would happen with modeling, you start to see the same people at auditions, or I'd be on the same teams with
Yeah.
people. So then you're like becoming almost like a pastor,
Right.
not just an evangelist. Like you're there to like listen to what they're going through. And just like you said, to show love and kindness. And a lot of times people are like, why are you helping everybody? And I
Yeah.
really felt like God was like, this is what I'm calling you to do. Like, I wasn't just in the industry to like become famous or make a lot of money, or it wasn't about me. And when I start to get my focus there, it's like he'd give me a nudge and, Amy, remember, this is about me. It was like he gave me that analogy from Jennifer Garner in that
Mm.
show, Alias. So,
Yeah.
like, she went undercover, right? And
Right.
so I felt like he was like, "You're going undercover for me." So you're wearing the costumes, you're doing these jobs, but really you're coming for me, showing my love to people, and then I'll show you when to talk, and when to speak. And just to
Yeah.
be a loving, kind person like that, it gets people's attention because especially in such a cutthroat industry where people are often trying to step on others or trying to get ahead themselves, and you come along and you're serving and you're loving and you're
Mm.
helping, it really stands out and makes you noticeably different. And that's where I think people can see the love of Jesus in you.
Yeah, for sure. It's so well said.
Thank you.
I'm thinking of the listeners, and there's going to be some people on here who really feel called to model or be in the entertainment industry. And I know we're going to talk about your book in a second, but what are some just practical tips and strategies you would give someone who feels like they're stuck or they don't know where to start or they're just hitting a wall and they're not sure what to do next? What
Sure, sure.
suggestions do you have for them for not only maybe practically, but also for their heart?
Yeah. I guess I think of a couple of different things. Like, I think a lot of times it does take a lot of knocking on doors. As you know,
Yeah.
being an actor and being in the industry, like it seems like you try and try, and sometimes you're just hitting a wall. You go on 8, 10 auditions, you're not getting it. Nothing seems to be working. But I feel like that's when you have to not give up because
Mm,
usually it's the breakthroughs around the corner. And I think it's like life when it gets darkest before the dawn. So
yeah.
I have that tagline on my email, never, never give up. And that's Winston Churchill. And
Mm,
it's like so true. So I think there's that piece in there. And then something that I learned early on from a model friend, we were doing bridal market together and, modeling bridal gowns down at the apparel center
yeah.
in Chicago, and her name is June. And she said, Amy, she goes, remember this. She's like, God is your agent. She's
Mm,
like, ultimately, every job that you're meant to have is going to come to you. It all goes through his hands. So if doors are closing, it's him closing the doors. And if doors are opening, it's coming from him. So you may have different agents, but he's ultimately in control. And then she taught me a phrase that is so good. She said, remember this. She's like, rejection is God's protection. So
right.
if you are not getting that job, you thought I should have it, or if you've experienced this in the industry, you're told you have the job and you're getting all ready for it. And all of a sudden they're like, sorry, they went a different direction or it falls through or you get canceled on and you're devastated. But
Right.
you have to ultimately remember he is in control. He's in charge. And if that job is meant for you, you're going to get it. And if not, he's protecting you. That rejection from that person, that client is him protecting you. So that's something to think about in other areas of life too. If you're
Yeah.
feeling rejected by someone, it's because God knows maybe that's not the best person for you to be around or the best job for you to have. And he's looking out for your best interests.
He is. He's so good.
Yeah.
And, I've thought about, some of us that have made career changes. So
Hmm.
I acted and sang and danced and did voiceovers and all that professionally until, well, I shouldn't give my age away, but I did it for like over 20 years. And,
Yeah.
that's a weird thing we have in the industry. Like, we don't
Sure.
talk about our age. Now I'm in ministry. I'm like, I should totally tell
Uh-huh.
my age. Who cares? Right? I don't
I
know.
totally get
It's
it.
been
Yeah,
ingrained in me. But anyways, so I did
I
the
know.
industry for a long time. And then I went into ministry and I gave up the industry and I went
Mhm.
into ministry for 10 years.
Sure.
And then I came back to Chicago and God was like, I want you to go back to it. And I thought,
Sure.
well, I don't miss it. It's okay. But when I started doing it again, I started having so much fun. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just made for this. And
Yeah,
so God
yeah.
has different seasons for us. So
Sure,
just
sure.
because I want to encourage someone who's listening, just because it doesn't feel like the season right now where, you don't feel like that fits in your life, listen to God. And as we just go where
Mhm.
he tells us, he'll lead us
Yes.
in the right direction. He may have taken something out of your life, but he might bring it back.
Yeah, I
So,
totally agree. And I feel like it's like to encourage people, it's never too late, and you're
yeah,
never too old. I think of that verse that says, the gifts and the calling of God are without repentance or irrevocable. Like he
yeah,
doesn't change his mind. If he puts those things in you, they're there for life. They're there, and you
right.
can fulfill those at any time or maybe more than one time.
Yeah,
And so I totally agree. I think that just frees people, and to
yeah,
not look at others and be like, well, why should I start this? It's like, why should I write a book at my age,
yeah,
in my late 40s when other people are very successful and they're way younger? It's like, no, but there's a unique
mhm,
story I have to tell, and there's a unique story you had to tell. And other people out there, like,
yeah,
no one is exactly like me or you, with our personality, our experiences, what we've been through. So we can uniquely bring something to the table. And I think that's something important to remember, whether it's modeling or writing or acting or whatever God's calling you to, don't count yourself out because
yeah.
you are unique and God needs you. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's given us all the experiences in our
Yeah.
lives, whether it's at the professional level or amateur level or whatever. Like we're like a big melting pot. He's like a little salt, a little pepper.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
this makes the perfect combination for that situation.
Sure.
So, well,
It's
let's
so
talk about
true.
your book. Let's get into
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
So, what made you want to write a book?
Wow, I guess I always loved writing from the time I was younger. And actually, a pastor that was in our wedding, Pastor Daryl Merrill, we were at Christian Life Church for years in Mount Prospect. And he always said, Amy, you should write your life story. So he dropped that seed in me like back in my 20s.
Hmm.
And I thought, yeah, maybe someday. And then I really love speaking. So I've done probably more speaking than writing. And I went to Proverbs 31, She Speaks, and Lisa Turkhurst was actually my small group leader there. And she said, Amy, you know what? You really need to write and publish a book. She's like, if you want to be a speaker and be taken credibly, you should write a book. Well, I thought, okay, that's a great idea. But at the time, my daughter was young and I was modeling and traveling and all that work was coming to me.
Hmm.
It didn't seem like the right time.
Yeah.
So it was after my son was born that I was seeking direction, and I was in a different place and we were dealing with health issues my son has had. And I was just kind of praying and asking God, and He was like, it's time to write.
Hmm.
So I started in 2011. It took me over 7 years to
Yeah.
write it and have it published.
Never give up.
Yes, exactly. Right. I didn't know what I was doing, but He faithfully led me step by step.
Yeah.
So that is how it came about.
Wow, that's
Mhm.
awesome. So, how did you decide like what we're going to get more into maybe people who are wanting to write a book about their life story and write a memoir?
Sure,
How
sure.
did you practically start laying out these are the chapters or these are the things I want to put in my book?
Yeah. Well, here's what I tell people because I have several friends now and people in the industry
Mhm.
that want to write a book. So I'm really encouraging people. I say, you know what? It reminds me of being like an artist, like a sculpture. Like if you're sculpting a pot. So imagine a pottery wheel, which I don't do this by the way, but I'm just thinking this is a good analogy. So it's the hardest thing is to get started, right? And I didn't know really what my book was going to be about. I knew it'd be about something in my life or my life in general. I said the hardest part is getting that clay up onto the wheel, like that's representing starting your book. Just like get it out there, like just write it, type it, do whatever you have to do. Don't judge yourself. Like my high school English teacher said, just brainstorm, put any answer down. It's no answer is a bad answer. And
Yeah.
so if you can just get yourself to like write, this is how I did it, just write your first draft. That is such a huge accomplishment because most people have ideas, but they never start because they have such a writer's block or they feel like I'm not good enough or they judge themselves so harshly or I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
So I think if you can get it up there on the wheel, get your lump of clay up there, then you can start to shape it, and then God will bring people in who help you refine it and shape it more and it end up being this beautiful piece of pottery. And that's sort of what happened for me. So after I wrote my first draft, I went to my friend Debbie, who does PR for Christian authors, and she said, Amy, you need a good editor. You need a content editor. So then she led me to her friend Beth Justino, and then Beth took me on, and then she really taught me how to write. So this is probably in 2015. Took
Mhm.
about 2 years. I did 4 drafts with her, And really, I didn't even know the first time I gave it to her, I thought she's gonna fix it and give it back to me. Oh, no, no, no.
No, they give you
She
like
said,
sticky notes and red marks, like
you're gonna
school.
fix it." I'm like, "What? Okay."
Yeah.
So it was like a 12-page evaluation, and this is what you need to work. I mean, it's overwhelming. But Debbie
Mhm.
said, "Amy, she's really good. She's really tough. But if she takes you on and helps you, you're gonna have a really good book." And she was right. So I did 4 drafts every time, this long evaluation. I often would cry. I'd be like, "I can't do it." And there
Aw.
came a point, yeah, like maybe my 3rd draft in, and she was, because it's we decided, she's like, "Okay, Amy, you can't just write an autobiography because you're not famous." And basically
Right.
no one wants to listen to a famous, unless you're famous. So I said, "Okay, yeah, it can't be birth now." She's like, "Take a slice of your life. A memoir is a slice of life." She's like, "What slice of your life is something you would want to write about? What stands out? What's exciting?" And I was like, "Oh, my modeling career is pretty unique, and God really led me." So that's how that came about. And then once we decided on that, we had to, like, get it chronological. She was very big on that. I had to get a big butcher piece of paper, put up on the wall, borrowed one from the butcher on the block over here in Huntley, and I had, like, every chapter, and I had to rearrange, and I was trying to make it make sense, and so I did all that. And then she was like, "Amy, you are telling too much." So I don't know if you heard about this with your book, but she's like, "It cannot be narration." And this is
Yeah.
more for memoir. She's like, "It's gotta be like you're writing a movie scene." Yeah, so I couldn't
Yeah.
get this show versus tell. I'm like, "I get what you're telling me to do, but I can't figure out how to do it." I go, "Beth, I'm going to my toolbox. I don't have the tool there." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Can I hire a ghostwriter?" She goes, "No." She's like, "God has called you to write this book. I believe you can do it." So she gave me 2 books to read. I read Shimmering Images, and it's Nancy something. I'm sorry, I can't remember the author's name, but Shimmering Images is the title, about how to write a memoir. And the other book she had me read was Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. And so even though it's fiction writer, she's like, "Well, memoir has an element of fiction because you're
Mm.
writing all this dialogue?"
Yeah.
And so there was a chapter on show versus tell. I must have read it like 7 times and
Wow.
till I got it, and then once I got it, she's like, "I am so proud of you." I'm like, "Thank God."
Oh.
So, yeah, this is probably one reason it took me so long, because I had to learn how to write, so she really
Yeah.
kinda taught me. And then I found an amazing publisher, so that also helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think even that, like, that's God putting the right people in your life. Like, if you wanted to write a book when Lisa Turkhurst first told you to, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have had the skills or the experience as you
No,
did
no.
later. And in
Yes.
the meantime, you've had, your modeling career has changed as,
Sure,
most
sure.
models in their 20s versus 40s, that career
Yes,
changes a little bit.
exactly. Yes.
If people were to get your book, what would be
Mhm.
the key takeaways that they would get from it?
Well, I think for me, like, or for what I think it would help with, it's not just people maybe that want to get into modeling or into entertainment, but maybe people that have a unique idea of how they want to do something in life, like a business or a non for profit or a ministry. And they're like, "I have this idea, but I've never seen anyone do it."
Mm,
And so, what I feel like God called me to do is be a pioneer and blaze a trail. And that's kind of the scariest thing to do. Like, you just want to know the path and follow someone, but sometimes He calls you to be the trailblazer. And so, I
mm,
feel like whatever you may feel God is nudging you to do or tapping you on the shoulder, if that's you, that this book will really speak to you, because I share my journey. And kind of 3 of the key themes are how He prepared me, how He provided for me, and how He protected me. And that's kind of throughout. And then it's funny because being from Minnesota, I'm from the woods,
mhm.
and I was a total tomboy triathlete. I was kind of like the least likely person that you would think would end up with a modeling career. So I have a very, like, self-deprecating sense of humor. So it's not this, "Oh, look at her, look at me."
Yeah.
I'm all that. I'm a model. It's actually pretty funny. So I share with you a lot of the things that I did that were, my faux pas and my mistakes. So it's actually pretty entertaining just to read it.
You
Don't
crack
have to
yourself
say.
up, huh?
Yeah, and I cracked myself up. So, yeah, I think it kind of surprises people in a pleasant way, that it's not
That's
really,
nice.
you know, what you think it'll be. It has more to it.
Yeah. You make me think
Yeah.
of, like, I'll once in a while say to my dad, I'll be like, "I'm so funny." Like, I'll do
Yeah.
something and then say, "I'm so funny." And my dad's response is
Oh.
always like, "Funny looking." And I'm like,
Yeah, there
"Ah,
you
ha, ha,"
go.
and it's just like a big joke, but,
Cute. Yeah,
yeah.
I would always say, I'm having a blonde moment." And there was stuff that, like, Beth made me take on there. She's like, not everyone may see blondes that way. And I'm like, I'm just like having fun with it, and
Yeah.
finding ways to be silly. But yeah, I had to take some stuff out because she thought this is not maybe not appropriate.
Yeah. Well, what I
Mm,
love is that you've lived your life by faith, going after what
yeah,
God told you to do, and the whole time he knew that he wanted to show you things and teach you things that you'd put into a book about you going into a direction that maybe required some boldness and courage,
yeah,
going into
mhm,
maybe an unconventional path, considering, your husband and the faith-based, you thought you'd go into
sure,
ministry. And
yes,
so it's a little bit more of an unconventional career path, I guess.
yes, totally.
Um, and God worked it all together for good, like he does. And now you're able to help encourage others. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I know I love to just encourage people, and that was kind of my heart even when I was in the industry. And
Mm,
I kind of want to say, like, I don't know, I feel led to say this that
sure.
as I was, yeah, in the industry, that I would help so many people, and sometimes I felt like God. I'm doing all this for other people and I'm helping them and, doing whatever I can. And then, what's happening for me? And it might be at the same time where I'm being asked to do jobs that go against my values and it's slow.
Mm,
But it's like you never know when the tables will turn, and when you'll flip the
yeah.
switch. And so it's like, I think it's just being prayerful every day and looking for opportunities to serve because your time will come and God's just going to open the floodgates. And all of a sudden you're like, I can't explain how I just got this job or that contract or this happened for me. And I think he just sees our heart, he sees that humility, he sees that servant attitude, and think of what Jesus said, the greatest of all is the servant, whoever wants to be
Yeah.
servant of all. And not to say you should be walked on. I don't agree with that. And there's times you have to set boundaries for sure. But I just feel like there's times you may feel like you're giving and you're doing what he's called you to do. And you're like, God, but what about me? Do you remember me?
Yeah.
And he does. And I think it's going to come. And then you're going to be like, okay, God, wow. And then people will be like, how did you get that job? Or how did that happen for you? And the only way you can explain it is God. Just let
Yeah.
God, because he just sees our heart and it all works out in his economy. And I think
Hmm.
that's what my father-in-law used to tell me, it's all going to work out with God, just keep doing the right thing, Amy. Your time will come. And totally for me. I mean, how do you explain having a successful career really in my 30s? Because I didn't start full time till I was 29. So
Yeah.
yeah, just that in itself is sort of a miracle.
Yeah.
Miracle.
In that industry. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. And really,
Yeah.
that's just about being a good steward with wherever
Yeah.
you're at.
Yes, totally.
Because God's
I
not up there
agree.
going, oh, you're 29, you missed the model boat.
Yeah.
He's not worried
Yes.
about it. If he's called you to it, he'll provide for it.
Yes. And that brings me to like thought of the parable of the talents. He often brings that to my remembrance, Matthew 25, and about how he gave one, servant five and one, two, and one had only one talent. And he said, now go and, multiply this. And most of them did, except for the one that had the
Mhm.
only one talent. And I was afraid. And I feel like a lot of times we get like that. Well, I'm afraid, God, I'm too old. I'm not talented enough, not pretty enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not well connected enough. We think of
Yeah.
all these excuses why we can't do what he's calling us to do, but he's like, just go, be faithful, step out. And what I feel like he's telling me again, even with writing my book or pursuing speaking or whatever he's calling me, Amy, you just go out there, you obey what I tell you to do and trust me with the results. Like we want
Yeah.
to figure out the results sometimes. Like, I'll do it, God, if you show me what's going to happen,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
if I know I'm guaranteed success or, but I think he just wants us to step out and trust him and obey what he's telling us and then just trust the results to him. So it takes the pressure off of you. My job is just to
Yeah.
step out and then he'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. It reminds me something you just said is that when we want to know that if I'm going to do all this work because God said I'm going to
Yeah.
be successful or it's going to be a number one bestseller or like God tell me what the
Yeah.
result is and then I'll commit to working hard. And
Yes.
sometimes he works that way. He's like, will you be faithful with this little step? Because if he told us the
Yes.
big thing, we'd either manipulate it or we'd be self-righteous. He knows all the different
Yeah.
temptations we
Exactly.
have to mess it
Yes.
up, right? But
Sure.
even
Sure.
bigger than that, I think there's more value in the journey than the destination.
I
Who,
agree.
who we become
Yes.
is so much more important than what we end up doing.
Yes. I
So,
totally agree with that. I
yeah.
think it's like Mark Batterson. He's one of my favorite authors. He
Mm.
says, your character is more important than your calling.
Oh,
And I
that's
think he
good.
said, "Don't let my or my calling take me where my character can't keep me." You know, and I think that's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah,
Yeah. You know what's
that's
funny?
one.
Thinking about the speaking thing, I think it was maybe a year ago. And
Yeah,
I speak once in a while and, I always, people always think that, when they look at, when people, here's what, okay, let me start this over.
yeah,
People can look at our websites or what we've accomplished and have an idea of what our success is.
sure.
And I think about a year ago when I was talking to the Lord about speaking, and I know He's called me to be a speaker and writing my next book and those things. But I came to the point where I said, Lord, I'm really enjoying my friends and my family and not traveling. And because there was just a season where I didn't go out as much.
Sure.
And I was really enjoying it.
Yeah,
And I was like, if you never give me another speaking gig again, I'll be okay
sure.
because you've given me people to influence in my circle right here. And I'm
Yeah,
happy with that. And sure
sure.
enough, like truly my heart meant it. Was no manipulation in that prayer. And wouldn't you know
Sure.
it, like a few months later, I started getting called for a lot of speaking gigs. And this year I've been really busy traveling and speaking. And
Yeah.
and I'm like, what you said earlier, like that truly was God. I've had people ask
Yeah.
me like, what did you do differently, to get more jobs? And I'm like, literally nothing. And I don't
Yeah.
even think it was that I gave it up and then He gave it back to me. It wasn't like that. It was just, God, I'm
Yeah.
content where I'm at. Show me my
Sure.
field that you want me to plow right now.
Sure.
And then He gives you more field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that surrender, that dependence, dependency on him and kind of just
Mm,
saying, God, your will be done, not my will. And then I think it's that trust factor, and it grows as we get older, but
yeah.
trusting that he knows what's best for us. He knows where we need to be. Like he takes our family into consideration, our friends, I have children. He
Hmm.
knows the whole big picture. And so I'm learning to trust more and more, because you'll hear
Yeah.
everyone say, this is what you have to do to be successful. And you have to build a platform and you have to do this.
Right.
And it's like, but what does he want me to do? I want to be in step with him because then there's going to
Right.
be life and peace. I think that
Yeah.
verse in Romans 8:6, it says to be spiritually minded brings life and peace. To be carnally minded brings death. So I want
Yeah.
to be led by his spirit. I want to be in a peaceful place. I want my family to be at peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. I know this is going to
Hmm.
minister to so many people hearing about just resting in God, trusting His timing, and also taking
Yeah.
bold steps because you didn't just
Sure.
sit around and do nothing. And
No, no.
you partnered with God. I think your story is a beautiful
Yeah.
example of
Thank
hearing Him,
you.
saying yes, partnering with Him, and just following along.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
it's been
so
amazing. God has been good.
It's so good. Well, where
Yeah.
can people find your book?
Okay, so a few different places. My publisher is Redemption Press. You can go to redemptionpress.com. And it's actually my full name. So my maiden name as well. So it's Amy Robnick, Robnik, Joob, Joob. So yeah, model behavior, make your career path your calling. It could also be found on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com.
Okay. I'll leave
Yeah.
all the links for listeners. I'll leave those links for you so that you can find her book on those resources from my website at jillmonaco.com/podcast. And then look for the podcast with Amy. I haven't decided what episode number this is yet, but look for that and you'll get that link and some of the other resources that she mentioned today. I'll leave those in the show notes as well. Amy, I so enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's been an honor. I really appreciate you having me.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. And if you did, there's a couple things I'd love for you to do. Number one, subscribe to my show. That way, the most recent episode will always be in your feed and ready when you are. And second, if the ministry has impacted you and you'd like to help me continue to reach others, please leave a review. Or you can click on the link in the description and you can give to support the show now. Again, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. You can find more out about Amy if you go to amyjoob.com. That's amyjoob.com, or go to jillmonaco.com and visit the podcast page. And you can find all those show notes that we mentioned today. Again, thank you for tuning in today, my friends. And remember, love well, you were made for it.